Regulatory bodies have a reasonable understanding of blockchain. At a technical level, it's been around for long enough now that they all actually have an understanding of the basics of what it is. The detail of how it works is often left to the technical people, and regulators often don't have a lot of IT people. They have a lot of policymakers, they have a lot of governance people to look after the licensed entities. So at the technical understanding, it's quite low. And that is important to actually be able to increase that, because often when people see something as technically complicated, they're scared off on it. So improving that level of technical understanding helps people in regulators to be less scared of a technology. And then they can obviously learn how they can use it. So I think at the moment the regulatory bodies are not yet clear on what a use case is for blockchain. I think they see it in the form of cryptocurrencies, and in many cases they see that as problems. But I think they haven't yet gotten to see the many different places that a blockchain can actually help them. There are examples such as transparency. Blockchains are surprisingly quite transparent. I think the immutable store of data is something that any regulator would go, I want some of that, which allows them to be able to see what happened and to be able to track back what happened in the past. So you don't have to sit on that transaction. It also means that you don't have to rely on a third party to be able to get that information. That information now sits in the blockchain, effectively encoded into the infrastructure. So anybody can read that. It also allows regulators to communicate with other regulators. It's a global world. Regulators and businesses are connected around the world. So a regulator in one country can read the information encoded in a blockchain in another country without actually having to understand or have relationships with that. So it allows cross-border tracing of transactions, which is an important element in a global world, solving global problems. Unintended consequences is the biggest risk in the regulating of blockchains. Regulators do sometimes overreach, sometimes accidentally, sometimes deliberately. And in many cases, it is because it is a hard job to write regulations for blockchain. Blockchain often upends their traditional models of what does a third party do, what does a licensed institution do, and what does a customer do. It is also international. So a regulator often has to think about, how do I deal with entities that are participating in my jurisdiction who might not be in my jurisdiction? So how do I handle that? It's hard for them to be able to put it together. The recommended approach for that is to work together with other regulators and look to things like industry standards. You can actually reach out to global industry standards and adopt them into your local jurisdiction, which helps you not have to solve that particular problem all by yourself. The community of people who are working in the BSV blockchain community are good-natured, competitive in a good sense. There's a good collegiate atmosphere. A lot of people solving the same problems together. I'm very impressed with the way people work together in a community, because I think they're inspired by the vision. The vision that Satoshi put forward in the original white paper was, how can we create a solution? He laid out a roadmap for us which we can work on and we can solve. So the inspiration of that is still motivating a lot of people in BSV blockchain community to solve these problems, to create good for the world, and to create value for themselves and for their customers. It would be very easy to say payments. I've been in the payment space for a while. Centbee is a payments processor and a payments operator, and we believe that payments is a very important use case. It's one of the earliest use cases of a distributed ledger, of an immutable data store, is to make a debit, make a credit, and for everyone to be able to look at that. So that is a very easy and very simple one. It is not yet reached the level of adoption that it could use. And I think elements that the Bitcoin SV blockchain has is the low fees and the very high volumes that are essential elements in a payment system. Any payments use case of blockchain needs to use those attributes, and Bitcoin SV has those attributes, which is why we believe it is an essential part of a payments use case. There are other elements though, such as the data that can be encoded into blockchain, which allows for things like identity to be permanently stamped, identity of senders, receivers, identities of participants in a particular transaction to be locked in and encoded into that. So it's not just the debit and the credit and the amount, but the additional information that can be encoded into a blockchain that is useful. And there's obviously tracking, so because it's a timestamp, it tells you not just what happened, but when it happened, which is also a very useful information point for logistics, supply chains, and those sort of entities that want to know what event happened when.